Prime Ministers meet to begin talks. Manus Detention Centre among discussions. And Simbu first to roll out satellite university.
This is National EMTV News with Neville Choi.
Good evening and thanks for joining me. This is Saturday's news. Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull arrived in the country last night. The Royal Australian Air Force A36002 landed at 8 p.m. at the Jacksons International Airport. Mr. Turnbull was received by Chief Protocol Officer Morea Veratau, Foreign Affairs and Immigration Minister Rimbing Pato, National Events Minister Justin Tachenko, NCD Governor Powis Pakop, Chief Secretary Isaac Lupari, and Australian High Commissioner to PNG Bruce Davis. Mr. Turnbull is in the country on a two-day official visit before he travels to India on Sunday. Simbu province is the first in the country to open a satellite university. The satellite university will offer diploma courses in business and communication development studies. This hopes to help the number of students who miss out in spaces in universities.
His visit symbolically reaffirms bilateral relationships between PNG.
It took over 3 years of planning for the province to open its first satellite university. Simbu's Deputy Administrator Alphonse Key says this has been a priority for the administration to establish a university center in the province.
To tell the public of Simbu and the university as partner that we will develop this satellite university to a full scale, meaning that we'll have all the facilities that we need.
The opening of the center comes as the University of Technology is phasing out diploma courses due to capacity issues. Pro-Vice-Chancellor Dr. Paul Genna says this is part of the university's plan and will extend to other provinces.
Because normally all mangi go work in my diploma and by 2 years. You complete him and then you go in 2 years degree. So mi bla to sem slow diplomas program ya mi bla by surgim go back all provinces. Or one in all places where all interest law partner one day mi bla.
The satellite university will focus on 2 diploma courses.
Law business studies where mi bla by roll him out. So I'm one bla first bla program by bla roll him la up. Not bla program and diploma in communication for developmental study.
Simbu Governor Noah Cole says the number of school leavers is increasing because of limited spaces in tertiary institutions. However, he believes this initiative will give school leavers a second chance.
We'll work with the government, we'll work with Unitech Council, Unitech, and then we'll try to make sure that you may support him one plan, another plan, and make sure that we provide opportunity for our grade 12s, for our sons and our daughters.
Meanwhile, Unitech Vice-Chancellor Professor Albert Scrum says a special space quota will be made available for students who graduate out of the Simbu Satellite University to continue to the main campus.
We cannot take in more students, but if we can allow students to do the first 2 years here in the province, then we only need to have them 2 years on campus to give them a degree. So we double our capacity because of your investment.
Stanley Over Jr., National EMTV News.
Meanwhile, Unitech Pro-Vice-Chancellor Dr. Paul Genna said the selection criteria for the satellite university will be similar to other tertiary institutions. Dr. Genna said school leavers who do not meet the requirements must upgrade their marks before they apply. He says the satellite university must be a model for tertiary education in the Highlands region. Applications for school leavers will be issued after the 2017 general elections.
Lo side lo select him all mangi na appoint him all workman by go pass and by me play using criteria of the university. So said mangi where you can me na D na F lo grade 1. No one thing on somebody go inside nothing. Mr. Gamba stop. You go through the DL na you upgrade the mark you go. Go come up lo C na B where you meet him. Entry requirements, blow diploma. And by me select him you. Sla culture you mean must propagating Luyana, Larim Ziwaka come, Eastern Islands come and up, Western Islands come, Southern Islands, and only come Luyana. All by some degree, Luyana go, long term.
And you're with National MTV News. We'll have more of the day's other stories after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the news. This morning, the Australian Prime Minister was given an elaborate tour of the Bomana War Cemetery ahead of commemorations of the 75th anniversary of the Kokoda Trail World War II campaign. Melisi Goviro was at the Bomana War Cemetery.
His visit symbolically reaffirms bilateral relationships between PNG and Australia through the single strongest historical bond between the nations. Following tradition, Turnbull laid a wreath in honor of sacrifices made by Australian troops and the Papua New Guineans who assisted them during the Kokoda campaign of 1942. He was then led on a walk that took him down a sacred memory lane. Each tombstone encapsulated stories of sacrifice, battles lost, and victories alike.
We've got people mixed completely up as they are.
The Bomana Cemetery is only one of numerous memorials across the country that preserve the memory of more than 8,000 Australians who lost their lives in a selfless fight for justice. 300 of which were killed in a 5-day battle against the Japanese on the fateful August of 1942 in Isurava, Northern Province. Turnbull also visited the site's memorial prior to Bomana in the company of Oro Governor Gary Jufa. The Isurava Memorial features 4 Australian black granite pillars that are each engraved with a single word: courage, endurance, mateship, and sacrifice. Values and qualities of Australian soldiers who fought along the Kokoda track. The Australian Prime Minister reflected on the significance of battles like that fought in Isurava as evidence of the solidarity between the people of Papua New Guinea and Australia.
We see 75 years ago, people of Papua New Guinea, Australians, fought side by side to keep Australia free, to defend Australia from invasion, to defend Papua New Guinea from the invasion of the Japanese Imperial Army. Those bonds that were built then are enduring.
Their conquest played a critical role in driving out Japanese soldiers in the aftermath of the Pacific War. Melisi Goviro, National MTV News.
The Manus Resettlement Processing Centre was among issues discussed during the PNG and Australia leaders' meeting today. Talks were on the work being done in the lead-up to the closure of the centre following a PNG Supreme Court decision. Prime Minister Peter O'Neill said work is progressing well and the processing of the refugees is also going well.
Around midday, Mr. Turnbull and Mr. O'Neill held a joint media conference. Prime Minister Peter O'Neill began by expressing sympathy for Australian citizens affected by Cyclone Debbie and the floods. On the Manus Regional Processing Centre, Mr. O'Neill said they are working to have the centre closed. He said some refugees were resettled in PNG with business houses willing to take in professionals who are able to work in PNG.
But as you know, many of the refugees are not willing to settle in PNG. We cannot force people in a resettlement exercise when they are not able to accept our offer. But if a third country is willing to accept their resettlement, we are quite happy to participate in that. Yeah.
Mr. Turnbull thanked Mr. O'Neill for PNG's continued cooperation in the fight against people smuggling, saying they will continue to work together to close the regional processing centre by the end of the year.
We have succeeded in stopping the scourge of people smuggling. As you know, there is a resettlement process of assessment for the purpose of resettlement in the United States underway. And we look forward to the conclusion of that work by the United States authorities.
Ongoing trade and investment issues between both countries were also discussed. Mr. O'Neill said Australia is by far the largest investor in PNG. He admitted that the country's revenues have been affected by global commodity prices.
Other than that, the economy continues to grow well above global standards, and I think that will continue to encourage more and more investment from Australia and the businesses that are doing business in Papua New Guinea.
Mr. Turnbull said the economic relationship brings huge benefits to both countries. PNG is the largest recipient of Australian aid, over $500 million a year.
It's supporting health, education, the empowerment of women and girls. Our bilateral merchandise trade was worth $5.8 billion in last year. More than 5,000 Australian companies do business with PNG. We have more than $18 billion of Australian investment in PNG.
APAC was also discussed, where the Australian government will provide support to PNG in the area of security. Also, Australia is providing logistical support and capacity building in the lead-up to PNG's national general election this year. Mr. Turnbull said he looked forward to discussing the economic relationship with PNG business leaders, entrepreneurs and Australian business leaders in PNG tomorrow at a business breakfast with the Australian PNG Business Council. Deli Waigeno, National EMTV News.
Member for Alatau, Charles Abel, says implementation is critical in delivering services to people. The Alatau MP said it is the effort of the district's administration to function so tangible services can reach people in communities. Mr. Abel made this statement when presenting Alatau District's 2016 DSIP acquittals yesterday.
Speaking prior to presenting the 2016 DSIP acquittals, the Planning Minister highlighted that implementation of projects remains a challenge and must be prioritized. He says the public service mechanism is reliable, but a project management unit is vital in seeing desired projects completed on time using allocated budgets.
We need strong technical and project management unit, and those managers within that unit should be working off contracts. So they have a lifespan, and within that lifespan they have to perform.
The Planning Minister reiterated that if districts work around a development framework, much can be achieved. Abel said for Alatau, the delivery of projects is significant as projects aim to impact the levels of government.
When I spend this DSIP money through my administration, I am building that service delivery framework. I am making sure that every ward has one elementary, every ward has one aid post, every ward has running water supply. Then I go up to the zone headquarters level.
The Alatau MP believes the district administration has rightfully followed the Finance Management Act. Meanwhile, ORD Acting Secretary Paul Sai is concerned that upskilling of the public service mechanism is the way forward for districts to develop.
We really need to upskill training, so it's a wake-up call by the government of the day, telling us public servants, wake up, train the frontliners, upskill them so that projects are going.
ORD officers will be checking the acquittal books with a hands-on report to project sites in Alatau District. Jack Lapave, Junior National, EMTV News.
Contractors who provided services for the Morobe Provincial Administration are demanding payments for their outstanding claims dating back to 2013. Spokesperson Likoi Koapo says more than 500 unhappy workers want their dues paid before the general elections.
At midday today, this group of contractors fronted up at the Morobe Provincial Administration demanding their outstanding payments. They say they have been waiting since 2013 for full payment. The workers want the current government to pay up before the elections and the possibility of a new government taking over.
So before the Nupla governor changes or Nupla something, people come look at him administration, don't be like him. Those debts have to pay out today. Whether you like it or not, whether illegal way, illegal way, job is rented. Job is rented, job is done because of this very small people on the grassroots level here, only work in the city clean stuff.
They say last year 4 million kina was approved by the provincial administration after they staged a protest at the Tutuman House. However, they claim they have not been paid. The workers are from both the provincial administration and the Lay City Council.
Last time they owned us 4 million. They make 4 million. That's 4 million been approved and bring me come, but where that money? That's why that's 4 million is not been sorted out. That's why the proper list people have been forwarded him. The genuine contractor been signed through provincial government. That's not been paid. All work another list again pay out. That's why it arises a problem. But only go through the proper way in the account system or the Sarkan only go way blog and straight, na be any document straight. I think no problem by no never come up.
In response to the Lay City contractors, City Manager Roy Cummins says the contractors are divided into 3 different divisions, but their claims are in the process of being paid out starting next week. Those with genuine claims with proper documentation can claim their outstanding payments from as far back as 2013. Mata Luis, National EMTV News, Lay.
It is the responsibility of maritime provincial governments to establish small craft boards. National Maritime Safety Authority Chief Executive Officer Paul Unas says this is to fully implement the Small Craft Act and decrease the number of boat accidents. Unas says that responsibility is under law and for practical purposes.
Speaking to MTV News yesterday, the NMSA chief executive says the Small Craft Act is sanctioned and provincial governments must establish boards to oversee that boat operators observe the law. Unas says safety at sea cannot be guaranteed unless regulators implement the penalties of the Small Craft Act.
We are available to support the provinces, and at the same time, the responsibility is also on our people to change their attitude so that we can all collectively implement the act properly.
According to NMSA, 10 out of 15 maritime provinces have commenced implementing the Small Craft Act. However, some are not fully implementing, primarily due to financial and capacity reasons.
Our officers have actually gone down to those provinces to be able to talk to the administration to get them to get their PECs to appoint the board as soon as possible. But at this point in time, it appears that we have not done any progress on that, and we will continue to liaise with them until they get to establish their boards.
A man in Alata was recently charged and has been convicted of a serious small craft offense and was imprisoned for 5 years. Unas says NMSA is continuously consulting maritime provinces and providing technical support,
as well as advisory roles to the provincial administration's board to be able to enforce the Small Craft Act.
Among the 4 provinces yet to establish the Small Craft Board is Medang, a province with eye-related boat incidents. Others include Gulf, Central and NCD. Jack Lapave, Junior National, MTV News.
Meanwhile, the NMSA chief executive says the public must observe the Small Craft Act. Mr. Unas says poor decision-making may pose risks when traveling out at sea. He says with the national elections nearing, maritime provinces must be aware of the consequences of breaching the Small Craft Act.
So that their boats are not overloaded and they get to not travel in the bad weather, and their supporters are not drunk, because these are usually some of the main ways whereby people get to expose themselves to risk. And
residents in Goroka are calling on authorities to look into the chain of Asian businesses in the province. Residents have complained that almost all stores in the central business district of Goroka sell the same items and are run by foreigners. Adelaide Sirox Curry with this report.
The suburban town Goroka has a population around 300,000 to 400,000 people and has become a tourist attraction for its spectacular yearly Goroka show. But residents who live in Goroka are now complaining about the number of Asian businesses in the central business district and surrounding suburbs.
Skin be shoe na one clothes. Imagine was on 1 month na 3 weeks in Brook. White man all working strong for something we not by last time one time life blah. Strong for something.
Pull up through now. Pull up through all dominating business law Goroka. Now all services will provide him. You know, good person before services blah.
Na inside the store too, so same kind something. Na in all strong plan all fake one. And most some solo tintin do me like him as all government mas totot na rausimol China go begin not less problem that's all.
The former Super Value store is now separated into 4 smaller stores that are selling the same products. However, member for Goroka, Birakimi Sopa, says they are providing services that most nationals aren't able to.
Business people ought to be doing in terms of trade. We can regulate and say, all right, you, Mr. A, you sell torches only, and Mr. B, you sell cooked food, and C and D and so forth, sell all kinds of stuff, not the same. But I think it's really supply and demand. You know, the consumers need the kind of things that they're selling. So, you know, they dictated by market forces. It's quite common now, right across the country.
Kimisopa says it is the same across the country with foreign and Asian businesses popping up. But he says, what other foreigners would you find that would want to conduct risky business in rural areas?
The places where you won't find decent service are being serviced by our people, the Chinese. You know, they in remote places in Okapa, in Lufa, opening shops, you know, saving the villages now. What other nationalities can go into remote Okapa and Lufa and open a store and sell the modern conveniences?
Adelaide Sirox Curry, National EMTV News.
A story now about Benjamin Barnabas, who was diagnosed with eye cancer. He says the lack of attention by government authorities has caused great depression among cancer patients. He called on the government to make available a specialist in the country.
Adding on to the lack of attention by the government for cancer patients, the continuous challenges at Engau, including shortage of medicine, limited space, and lack of cancer facilities, have caused a lot of depression to the patients. Diagnosed with eye cancer, Benjamin Barnabas is one of the many who are affected. Barnabas took some time out from his ward to celebrate the World Health Day, despite the theme focused on depression.
Mi magi mixi bagara blo 6 players mista na now mi todo mi pani house ground lo gata minoxilin lo mi now mi kam stalo lei tanti po moya mo lusimi na dai ino line lo mi so mi oglo troma mo lo mo to dis la sikta so please me ask you government no one more volunteer blasta ina block siwam da specialist come inside.
World Health Day is an international event celebrated worldwide to build a better, healthier future. According to health experts, depression is the leading cause of disability in the world today. Dr. Goiba Tianeng from the psychiatric ward at Engau said the general trend for PNG is the increased psychiatric problems with insufficient government services.
There's very few psychiatrists, there's very few psychiatric social workers and psychiatric nurses. Even though we've trained enough psychiatric nurses, most have moved out.
Furthermore, people with depression need understanding and empathy. Dr. Tianeng said all health workers should understand patients and work closely with them.
Empathy is not feeling sorry for patients, but feeling like the patient, putting yourself into the patient's shoes and trying to understand them. So,
Julie Badui Owa, National EMTV News, Ley.
You're with National EMTV News. In stories making headlines overseas, the latest on the chemical weapons attack and the response from the United States. After the break. To the news. The decision to strike Syria over its use of chemical weapons on civilians is on the headlines again. In the United States, President Trump's actions have raised questions. Was it warranted? Was it wise? Is it part of a larger strategy for Syria? We begin with the latest on the possible Russian involvement in a chronology of the operations itself.
Tonight, the U.S. military is investigating whether Russia was complicit in the Syrian regime's gruesome chemical weapons attack on civilians earlier this week. Specifically, whether a Russian warplane dropped a bomb on a hospital treating victims of the attack 5 hours later, perhaps to destroy evidence. U.S. intelligence shows that a Russian drone flew over the hospital site just before the bombing. The probe comes after President Trump ordered a barrage of missiles on a Syrian airbase in retaliation for the deadly attack. The first U.S. military strike against the Assad regime in the country's bloody 6-year civil war. Today, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley warned of possible further U.S. military action.
The United States took a very measured step last night. We are prepared to do more, but we hope that will not be necessary.
The target of the strikes was Syria's Shayrat Air Base, launch point for the Syrian warplanes that carried out the chemical attack. The Pentagon says 59 of 60 Tomahawk cruise missiles severely degraded or destroyed their targets, including aircraft, hardened aircraft shelters, fuel and ammunition dumps, and air defense systems. The Pentagon estimates some 20 aircraft were destroyed, though video of the aftermath shows several shelters still standing and military aircraft undamaged. U.S. missiles left the runway intact and avoided chemical weapons storage to prevent civilian casualties. The march to military action took little more than 48 hours. The planning began Tuesday, the day the world saw the first images of victims, many of them children, of the chemical weapons attack. On Thursday, before President Trump sat down to dinner with the Chinese president, he met with his national security team to discuss military options, deciding then to order the strike that night. At 8:40 p.m. Eastern Time, the middle of the night in Syria, the attack began. 2 U.S. warships in the eastern Mediterranean, the USS Porter and the USS Ross, launched the 60 Tomahawk missiles towards the Syrian airbase. Trump sat through dinner alongside the Chinese president as the attack was underway. Then, just 35 minutes later, at approximately 9:15 p.m. Eastern Time, the president's national security team briefed him on the mission's results.
The poison gas attack that killed at least 86 people and injured dozens more prompted U.S. President Donald Trump to order a missile strike on a Syrian airbase that has put the crisis on the world stage 6 years after the carnage began.
They call it the cradle of the revolution. This is Dara, Syria, a small town about 50 miles from Damascus. Here is where graffiti containing anti-government slogans sparked the start of the Syrian uprising. It was March 2011, and more than a dozen children had been arrested for drawing that graffiti. Protesters demanded the release of the children and democratic reforms. It quickly turned violent, with protests spreading and Syrian security forces opening fire on crowds.
If it is bombed every day and 1,000 people die, this is our land and we will not leave it.
Protesters targeted the government of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad.
Our enemies are working daily and scientifically in order to undermine the stability of Syria.
The regime's response was swift. A brutal crackdown, massive arrests and casualties. The president made promises that never came.
The level of anger and passion here is absolutely palpable. We're just a few miles from the center of Damascus, and this is a crowd here of perhaps... Thank you. This is a crowd here of perhaps several thousand people. They've taken over this whole area.
The government militia continue to torture and murder their own people using tanks and surprise raids.
I am not the only one whose life has been destroyed or whose husband is missing. Everyone in this country has a missing person or a destroyed home or is displaced. We have been through so much. We have suffered and have come to hate life because of all these problems.
Emails obtained by CNN, apparently from the Assad's private email accounts, show throughout it all they continue to live a life of luxury. One day in February 2012, the same day opposition fighters in Homs reported more than 200 killed, Mr. Assad's wife was emailing a friend about shoes she liked that cost about $7,000 a pair. In another email in which Syria's First Lady used the fake name Alia, she contacted a London art dealer about art that cost as much as $16,500. All of this during the senseless slaughter of Syrian civilians. The UN estimates about 400,000 Syrians have been killed since the war began in 2011. And as of last December, nearly 5 million Syrians have fled the country, only adding to the refugee crisis in the Middle East. Many in Syria have lost hope.
We are not scared. I mean, at least personally, I'm talking now. I'm not scared of the chemical weapon. I mean, does it make a difference to die with a bullet or with a chemical weapon?
The missile strike was one of a number of options President Trump's military advisors presented him. In choosing, he joins a long list of U.S. commanders-in-chief who used military strikes to punish an adversary or send out a message.
5 years before the 2003 war against a U.S.-led coalition, Saddam Hussein's Iraq was punished by bombing and Tomahawk missile strikes. Whoa. A punitive 4-day campaign ordered by President Bill Clinton following Iraq's refusal to comply with UN Security Council resolutions. Much of Iraq's military infrastructure destroyed. Iraq said hundreds of its troops and civilians were killed. It wasn't the first strike designed to punish the Iraqi regime. In 1993, 2 years after the first Gulf War, 23 cruise missiles were launched into downtown Baghdad, a warning after an assassination plot was uncovered in Kuwait on former President George H.W. Bush, who was visiting the country he helped liberate during the 1991 Gulf War. Colin Powell was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time.
Should Mr. Hussein even dream of retaliating, we have more than enough force in the region to deal with it.
The missiles hit a building believed to have housed Iraq's intelligence service. Punitive attacks have also been used in retaliation for murders of Americans. In 1986, Libyan strongman Muammar Gaddafi was said to be behind the bombing of a disco in West Berlin. 2 U.S. servicemen were killed. The U.S. military reply? 60 tons of munitions raining down on Gaddafi's compound in Tripoli.
My fellow Americans, at 7 o'clock this evening, Eastern Time, air and naval forces of the United States launched a series of strikes against the headquarters, terrorist facilities, and military assets that support Muammar Gaddafi's subversive activities.
And the result?
Back there is the building where his wife and children were staying when the bombing came on Monday night. 2 of them were injured. The smallest child, an adopted daughter, was killed.
Today, we have done what we had to do. If necessary, we shall do it again.
Gaddafi survived. He wasn't at the site. Dozens of Libyans died, as did 2 U.S. Air Force pilots. Another punishment for the murder of civilians came in 1998. Operation Infinite Reach led to strikes against al-Qaeda targets in Sudan and Afghanistan, after the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania were bombed. More than 200 people were killed, up to 4,000 wounded. These punitive strikes have been used by a long line of U.S. presidents to punish or to warn others when their actions are deemed a threat to American interests.
I said that we would act with others if possible and alone if necessary.
You're with National EMTV News. True Guy Sports is next. That's after these short messages.
True Guy Sports.
Welcome to True Guy Sports. To cricket first, after the 2-1 loss to the United Arab Emirates last week in round 5 of the World Cricket League Championship ODI series, a disappointed Hebo PNG Barramandi's captain Asad Vala said despite being equal on level of play, his team did not grab opportunities they were presented with. He said it was a jittery start for them when they ended up losing by 82 runs, but their comeback in the second ODI showed improvements in fielding and bowling with their 26-run win. Unfortunately, the decider ODI did not go as planned. The PNG side lost by 103 runs, a sour deficit to swallow. The PNG captain admits there are a lot of improvements to be done in the batting department. Otherwise, the T20 Intercontinental Cup Series Round 5 began yesterday. It'll be played next week against the host nation again, and the Barramandis plan to make it play out in their favor this time around. The PNG Pukpuk Sevens team went down to a tough Spain outfit 15 points to nil in their third pool match of the HSBC Hong Kong Sevens 2017. With 2 wins and a defeat, PNG now sits second to Spain with a 2-point deficit in Pool G.
31 points to 5 over Guyana.
Registering the first 2 wins in day 1 of the tournament was utterly rewarding for the Pukpuks. However, facing a more skillful and physical opponent in the same pool would test the team's core in defense. This was the anticipated feeling for Coach Douglas Guys and his men. Spain, riding on the back of their 2 successful day 1 match wins against Guyana and Uruguay, proved difficult for PNG to contain.
PNG go on the attack through Clement. Arthur Clement, ball in one hand.
The Spanish big forward pack dominating possession and eventually muscling their way in for the first try.
Stop him though. Too good, Angel Lopez.
Spain's 21 passes to PNG 2 would be the reason why PNG was left trailing Spain by 5 points going into half-time. Coach Douglas Guy's barking instructions during the break seemed to have lifted the side.
Our one-on-one sticks are very good, our squeeze is very good. The defense we got there.
But a sin bin to William Thirang in the start of the second half left PNG defending with 6 men. Spain then took the advantage and crossed over for their second. Although the replay would show a double movement, the try was already awarded.
Initially, there is momentum that been spot. No leg power going on. What do you reckon, Willie? Oh, I think it's double movement.
With 45 passes thrown by Spain and 9 to PNG, a try was expected sooner rather than later, and it came in the corner. The statistics showed PNG 39 tackles to 6 and 67 completed passes from Spain compared to PNG none. This statistics simply translates no ball, no tries. Despite the loss, PNG and Spain both qualified for the quarterfinals. Shane Saroya, National EMTV Sports.
Trukai Sports continues after the break, and we'll have basketball and NRL. Don't go away.
Trukai Sports.
Welcome back to Trukai Sports. Basketball PNG is now using the Pickaninny Hoops program to pioneer peace and positive change both on and off the courts. CEO Joel Kalu says the aim of the federation is to educate children on vital points like fair play and sportsmanship.
Each Wednesday for the last 3 weeks, children between the ages of 6 and 12 have been coming together for Basketball Federation of Papua New Guinea's Pickaninny Hoops program. Not only are the children being taught the fundamental skills in the program, but they're also learning the important values of life, including teamwork, sports, and enjoying the sport. Basketball PNG is now applying one of its 2017 policies, Pickaninny Hoops, to help break down barriers by utilizing basketball. The program was introduced to bring aspiring youngsters together to have fun and enjoy the sport. Basketball PNG CEO Joel Kalu says changing the mindset of children to bring positive change is something the Federation is aiming to achieve.
At the moment, we're targeting those players aged 8 to 12. We want them to, learn how to play the game the right way, but also it's about, teaching them to love the game.
Kalu says the most important thing the Federation wants is to get the young players to love the game and live a healthier lifestyle.
They're practicing teamwork, they're practicing communication, they're learning discipline. So all those wonderful things that sport brings, these kids are starting to get exposed to. And that's a focus for us on this program.
He said 2017 is a very special year for the Federation as they prepare to host the inaugural Melanesian Cup in September with PNG to play host.
The squads will commence training, basically straight after the national championships in mid-July, and then we will announce the final teams for Melanesian Cup, I would say, in mid-August. So they'd have 4 weeks as a squad to impress the coaches, and then we'll name some teams, and they'll have basically another 4 weeks to prepare for Melanesian Cup.
Carlos said the Federation has seen many young talent come through the program from a variety of backgrounds who actually love and enjoy the sport of basketball. He said for many of them, they are too young to understand what's happening in the code of basketball, but in the long run, the code of basketball will be looking forward to breaking barriers. Godwin Aki, National EMTV Sports.
To the NRL now, in St. George, Illawarra Dragons defeated the Manly Sea Eagles in their Round 6 match this afternoon. Dini Rose Raiko with the results.
And the Manly Sea Eagles just haven't responded.
As of this afternoon, the Dragons are at least temporarily first on the points ladder after the 35-10 win over Manly. The Dragons were too strong while Manly lacked possession right from the start, and they clearly struggled with ball execution all throughout the match. Windup's strike came 2 minutes in and converted again to give the Red and Whites an early lead with 6 points to nil. Unfortunately, that did not kick up any responsive defence from Manly. Minutes later, Dragons scored again.
We have a look at the tries. Welcome back to Michael Ennis and Brett Kamali.
Even Josh McCrone did a runner for the try line and outdid Manly's defenders in the process, despite returning from a hamstring injury. Desperate for a try before halftime, Manly took advantage of a penalty when George Taufua executed a cutout ball to Blake Green, who scored.
Right back in the contest. Yeah, as we have a look at the stats,
By halftime, the scoreline was at 20 points to 6 in favour of the Dragons. The second half did not play out any better for the Sea Eagles. Despite another unconverted try, that was all they could get on the scoreboard. From there on, Dragons piled on the tries. Late attempts by Tom Bojovic to shepherd a ball dead after a Dragon kick took a different turn when Windop again made it to the ball for the touchdown. And at full-time, the Dragons defeated Manly 35-10. Dini Rose Raiko, National EMTV Sports.
In the AFL, Richmond is unbeaten and on top of the ladder after an upset win over West Coast at the MCG. The Tigers recovered from a slow start to stun the Eagles.
No helmets for Dustin Martin as two Brownlow medalists started side by side before Dan Butler showed a clean pair of heels.
Tucks it under the arm, nobody in front of him at all. Bailey will take it almost a length and kick the goal.
A broken cheekbone not slowing Dusty down.
Traps it beautifully, swings around now, snaps it towards goal and kicks a sensational goal.
Todd Elton couldn't make a dent in the 7-point halftime margin, but the Tigers would soon find their spark.
Rioli does really well, keeps it in play, gets it back, tucked in the pocket, banana, check side. How do you like that?
Daniel Rioli with an early contender for goal of the year as Martin put the Tigers 7 points clear.
Dusty does it again.
But the Eagles edged their way back in front, only for the lead to change hands once more. Fans forced to run for cover as the heavens opened to start the last. Nick Floston's day was cut short. Mark Lacroix had a chance to level the scores but couldn't convert. And Rewalt kicked truly in the pouring rain.
That'll do the job. That will do the job for the Tigers.
3 and Z, the lid's off. Final football.
I won't say that yet, mate, but the fans might, but yeah, it's good.
And that ends True Kai Sports. The weather details when we come back.
Kai Sports. True Kai Sports.
The weather details are proudly brought to you by Dulux Weather Shield. Worth doing with Dulux. And the weather forecast for tonight and tomorrow. Southern region, Port Moresby mostly fine, partly cloudy afternoon and chance of light evening showers later. Mostly fine and partly cloudy afternoons, and then fine night for Daru and Olatau. Cloudy with afternoon showers imminent, then fine in the evenings for Popaneta, and mostly fine for Kerama. In the Momase region, partly cloudy with a chance of afternoon showers at 2 for Leh, afternoon showers and possible thunderstorms for Madang, a chance of afternoon showers and fine in the evening for Wewak, and partly cloudy in the afternoon with a chance of light evening showers for Vanimo. In the New Guinea Islands region, cloudy with afternoon showers and possible thunderstorms for Lorengau, cloudy and afternoon showers and thunderstorms for Keveng, Rabaul, Kokopo, mostly fine, cloudy with afternoon showers for Kimbe, and mostly fine and partly cloudy in the afternoon in Boka. In the Highlands region, cloudy afternoon with evening rains for Mendi and Wabeg, partly cloudy in Goroka and Kundiawa, and partly cloudy in the afternoon with evening showers imminent before morning fog for Mount Hagen. Forecast for small ships for the next 24 hours. There is a strong wind warning current for all coastal waters from southern PNG, Indonesian border through Torres Strait to Daru and Russell and Sudest Islands. Waters of Samurai Island to Cape Vogel to Finschhafen seas 0.5 to 1.5 meters. Waters of Madang to Bogia to Wewak to Aitape and Vanimo to the northern Indonesian border seas 2 to 2.5 meters. Waters of New Ireland to New Britain and Bougainville seas 1.5 to 2 meters. Waters of Manus and its western group of islands seas 1.5 to 2 meters. To ocean forecast for PNG areas, Coral Seas, seas moderate to rather rough at 10 to 25 knots. Solomon Seas, seas slight to moderate at 10 to 15 knots. Bismarck Seas, seas moderate to rather rough at 20 to 25 knots. Pacific Ocean, seas slight with north to northwest winds at 10 to 15 knots. The weather details are proudly brought to you by Dulux Weather Shield. Worth doing with Dulux. Before we go, recapping our headlines again. Australian Prime Minister on a 2-day visit in PNG, Manus Detention Centre among discussion topics between our two leaders, and Simbu becomes first province to establish a satellite university. And that's news, sports and weather for Saturday, the 8th of April, 2017. From all of us here at EMTV, pleasant viewing. Good night.